I'll sound a little bit scripted just at the beginning when I introduce you, then we can just talk.
Sounds great.
Right. Welcome to the Intentional Father podcast. We have a special guest today, Monica with the Sunflower House. Monica, you want to introduce us real quick? Tell us about yourself and the Sunflower House, and then we'll jump into some of the parental implications of the conversation today.
Sure, sounds good. So my name is Monica. I'm the education director at Sunflower House. Just a quick snapshot of what we do at Sunflower House as a whole is we provide forensic interview services for kids who've disclosed abuse. We work with law enforcement and DCF. So if there is a hotline call and the child has disclosed any type of abuse, really, they'll come through Sunflower House to do the forensic interview portion. And then we also have therapy available at no cost to the families that come to see us as well, too. My portion is the educational programming. So most of the services that we have at Sunflower House are retroactive. The idea of the education program is to be proactive. So we actually have programming for kids in the schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, different programs for each, not the same program for kindergarten and 12th grade, but kind of what really hits along kind of the things that they might be going through regarding personal safety, how to get help. Internet safety is a big one. Just going in and just letting them know that they have rights and kind of addressing some of those topics that are also set forth in the Kansas Department of Education standards. Often we co-present with our partners with KC Metro FBI, especially when we do our internet safety programming. And on the flip side of that, we want to make sure that the parents have support and that those people that work with kids have support too. So we do have adult programming for parents, and then we have professional programming for like your teachers, admin, counseling staff, anybody who really works with kids as well too. So that's what we do in a really tight snapshot there.
All right. Well, let me just say thank you for all the work that you guys do because you're making a big difference. And the proactive piece is really why I wanted to have a conversation with you today. The intentionality behind parenting, is a lot of that is being proactive. So as we think through being intentional, uh, what are what are just off the top of your head, maybe some best practices for parents, uh, either best practices or even things to consider so we can be proactive with our children.
Just like personal safety in general, I would say big things is just making sure who you know your kids are spending time with, right? Get to know their friends' parents, get to know the teachers, get to know coaches. And then even if your kids are little, what are the ratios in a daycare setting? Who's their daycare teacher? Who's going to be interacting with your child? So those are big things. Make sure your child knows that they have rights, knows about personal safety. I know a big one for parents sometimes is make sure that they know the names of their private parts if they're little. I know sometimes that's uncomfortable for people, but I'm seeing that a lot less than we used to. That way, if they do have to disclose, they know it's less confusing, and also it creates shame around those parts if they're not even allowed to say those parts. And then internally, they will just statistically learn to blame themselves. So that's just a really good start. The biggest thing, so my title actually used to have the word prevention in it, and I never loved that because I'm not like a superhero out with a cape preventing
Yeah.
all things bad, So, but the idea is still prevention. And when you talk about what is prevention, the biggest thing is going to be communication. So when you have a child who has somebody that they can rely on and talk to, no matter what age they are, and it doesn't always have to be a parent, but ideally it should be a parent, but somebody that they can talk to that is an adult. I'm not to say there's a less, not necessarily a less chance of them being in a situation that might be uncomfortable for them, but if they have somebody to talk to, they might know how to get out of a situation, but certainly who to tell. And that's the biggest thing. So we want to really promote communication between parents and children. That's really going to be the biggest piece if we want to talk about prevention. And then, of course, education, right? So you have to be kind of on top of really internet safety is a big one when we're talking about educational programming. What are your kids doing online? What the heck is this app that they're going to use? Are you okay with it? And you have to really And if you need to have somebody tell you that you are the parent, you are the expert on your child, then I'm saying it right now, right? And you have 100, you have the floor to say no, and it's going to be bad. But if you think about, when we were teenagers, we were angry at our parents all the time too, right? So it's just a natural
Hmm.
progression. So, say no until you know what they're doing online as well too. So I guess that's some good parenting tips to throw in there too.
Okay. Just to make sure I heard you correctly, you're saying that as a parent, we are allowed to create boundaries around screens for our children?
100% do it. I
Okay.
encourage it. Yes, encourage boundaries, and have kids know about boundaries even in real life, right? So that they should understand that, nobody should cross their boundaries and they can't cross other people's boundaries either. So start teaching respect at young ages. That's a great conversation to have. I think that we all know that we want our own space, but other people get their own spaces too, and that bleeds into online, right? So even your online etiquette that kids don't want to be cyberbullied, but they have to make sure that they're not also the problem,
Uh,
so absolutely boundaries is one of our biggest topics when we talk about education. So if you were to look at any of our education programs that we do with the kids, every one of them has the theme of boundaries and what that means at that age level.
okay. On staying on topic with the screens, online safety, what are some of the biggest dangers out there that you guys are seeing that parents should just be aware of when it comes to protecting our kids? What are kids coming into the Sunflower House being either exposed to, or what's the thing that's opening those doors for safety to be jeopardized?
Okay. Well, a lot of it is there's gonna be your kids that just have free access, right? And kids are curious, and we can't fault them for that. So they'll hear something, and like middle school, they're all talking about some app they're doing. They're all gonna try to get on it, and they will also do it, even if you set boundaries. So again, you really want to have open and honest dialogue with your kids. We do see specifically in this area, and again, we serve Johnson and Wyandotte County, so I don't know if that's helpful if I talk about this area, because like I said, we work very closely with the FBI Cybercrimes Task Force, so we really want to stay on top of what's local. But we see that they're particularly the ages of 9 to 14-year-old boys are being targeted online right now. And there's many different apps that this could apply to, but a lot of the things is they're meeting somebody online who they believe is another girl their age, and truly it's somebody else, right? It's an adult, usually almost all the time based in another country, and in those countries it'll be the ones that we have that US jurisdiction has less access to, less jurisdiction. So predators know this, right? But it seems to turn into what the kids would assume as a relationship, but really it's more of a financial scheme. And so what's been happening is this age group in particular, and boys, like I said, in particular, will get to the point where they end up sending a naked picture and then immediately comes back, well, if you don't, you know, get me a gift card or send your mom's credit card information, I'm going to send this picture to all your contacts. And so that's something that we're seeing a lot happening right now, especially for that age group. Um, like I said, kids really truly believe that the relationships that they're building online are real relationships. So
Hmm.
as parents, we also have to wrap our mind around that. Like what do our kids consider to be their friends? What does their relationship look like? Because, if we really want to embrace this, we would have to kind of embrace the dialogue and the, progression of what is really happening with kids online and what they actually truly consider to be relationships. And so we're seeing this happen a lot. And so we just advise that kids, they're going to be convinced that they have to do A, B, or C, right? So we say, actually, at this point, we want the kids to say something, and it's going to be hard, but also not to respond, because really it's a financial scam. And so if that doesn't continue, more than likely they're not going to be sending it to people, because really the point is to make money.
Hmm.
And so we've seen that happening a lot. We have seen um, some kids reach out and meet people online on platforms that are more monitored or US based, like Instagram, things like that. And then they will be asked to download another app and to connect on that app. A lot of the times that we will see these, again, they're going to be based in other countries, what they're going to be telling the kids to download because there's no jurisdiction and no monitoring and very little restrictions on, even if it says you have to be 16 or 18 plus to, have an account on this app, there's no monitoring on
Right. Yeah.
how that really works. And so then we're seeing, if we're talking about like in-person predators, the people that are connecting with kids and then meeting them in person, that's kind of what we're seeing happening is they're going to be asked them to download another app and then they're going to chat on that other app. And so those are things to look out for. We tell kids also, and parents, this is also good for parents, don't click those links that have like .ru or something else attached to the end. .com is based in the United States, so just to let you know that. But when you start clicking on other links or downloading those other apps, you can kind of tell if it's based in a different country, just because of the web address or the IP.
Yeah. And one of the practices I implement for myself and suggest to others is audit your kid's phone
Mm-hmm.
on random times. And I suggest sometimes do it with them and sometimes do it without them. I'll sometimes in the evenings I'll have my kids turn in their phones and I just kind of look through the apps, do a little app audit, and I take it on myself even to look at some of the communication in the apps and texting just to see what kind of communication is going on there. And I think parents are allowed to do that. It's part of
100%.
keeping them safe and yeah, kids get involved in these things and they have no idea what's going on. I know with the scenario you mentioned about, the inappropriate picture, then hey, send me money or else this is going to get blasted everywhere to all your contacts. I mean, not necessarily locally, but I know on the East Coast that's led to a kid committing suicide. He felt like it was so embarrassing and there was no way out. He ended up taking his own life and while his parents were in the house. I mean, he was upstairs and kids are at such a vulnerable place in life where some of those pressures can be overwhelming. So
Absolutely.
it's yeah,
And
it's good.
there's some great resources too, besides telling, which we want them to do because more than likely they're not going to be the only victim in these cases. But there's a new tool called Take It Down. It's with NCMEC. And I'm happy to I can email that to you or like however you want me to do that. But actually they work with the FBI. So that way the kids, if they're really, really don't want to talk about it, they actually work to get pictures taken off the internet.
Hmm.
So it's a great tool to have. So it's with NCMEC, which is the National Center for Exploiting and Missing Children. So if you look that up, but if you just Google Take It Down, you'll have access to that service too. So that's a really good one to have. And as for just, parenting tips with that, I love the idea. And we say this too, have your kids check in your phone at night. They don't need to be, um, nothing good happens at like 1 o'clock in the morning, right? So that's just kind of a thing to just keep in your head. Have them check in the phone at night. Maybe the charger's by your bed. They don't need to be online all night long, anyways, or whatever their device is. That's a great one to have. And then communication, right? Just talking about these things. Kids, however, even if you don't want them to have certain apps sometimes will do things anyways, as we know teenagers are teenagers, right? So we do say when if you're checking their phone and let them know you're doing it too, maybe so if you say maybe you can have TikTok or something like that, you can check the battery usage on your phone if you go into settings. So even if they tell you, if you go to, I'm not going to get this, I'm not going to do this app, and they go to school, download the app and then delete it and come home, you don't see it on their phone, but if you look at battery usage, it'll still be there in the phone. So that way, they're still downloading apps, even if
Yeah.
they tell you they're not. So that's another little parental trick you can
Yeah,
do.
that's a
But,
good tip.
let them know you're doing it, if you want to keep those lines of communication open also.
Yeah. And there's also these cover up apps where it looks like the calculator app, but it's actually a different app under you can have like Snapchat underneath it. And yeah, these kids are sneaky. They're
They
finding
are.
ways. But so we gotta We got to pull our resources to stay on top of them.
Right. They're
But
smart. They're smart. They're going to
yeah, they're
outsmart us at
smart.
every, that's why whenever we talk about our programs for parents, when we give information about apps and all this stuff, I always say, well, it's going to change tomorrow, just because
Uh-huh.
it's ongoing and the kids are just geniuses at this stuff, right? They're just geniuses. They're kind of born that way. But yeah, it's just all about trying to stay on top of it and communicate.
Yeah. If we're to shift a little bit and go from online to in-person safety, I think every parent's nightmare is their kid being physically or sexually abused. What are give us some of that general education that you have, and then let that kind of lead us into practical steps that parents can take to keep our kids safe.
Sure. Well, I think again, a lot of that is just making sure you know who your kids are spending time with, making sure that they know they can talk to you about anything, even the hard stuff, right? So even if they talk to you about something that's incredibly uncomfortable, go scream in a pillow later, right? You just want to make sure you're open and present to whatever they're saying. Stop everything that you're doing, especially if they actually want to have a serious conversation with you. Even it's never too late to start that flow of communication either. So even if if you have a little kid, make sure maybe that 15 minutes after dinner is theirs and you just play with them. So kids, especially the younger ones, they communicate through play. So even if they're not saying something that they might be bothering them, you're going to see it through play. So maybe open up that time to do whatever and let them lead the play, because that really establishes that trust and communication and also their decision making for future. So it kind of lays that foundation. So do whatever that they want you to do, right? If you have to put a sock on your head and run around the house for 15 minutes, whatever the game is, just do it. As long as like there's safety limits, so you're not like jumping from the top stair or whatever. So really let that play and let them lead you. And then as they get older, like your adolescents, maybe that time after dinner you shoot hoops or whatever. And we also see a lot of times that teenagers like the time of 11:30 p.m. at night. I don't know why that is too, but that might be your communication time. But just to have those times where they are free to talk to you, free to play with you, they have your undivided attention. Um, so those are great ways just to, not so maybe not like fishing for like a disclosure necessarily, but just like opening up those moments for talking about absolutely anything. As we know, well, I don't know if this is actually a stat that is out there, but the average age of disclosure right now is 52 years old. Which
Wow.
blows my mind, right? Blows my mind. So, just statistically, like we have some rough numbers about kids, and kids that maybe have experienced abuse, right? But we may not know until much later. So if we have those times when kids can talk to somebody, anybody, right? When they have those moments,
Mhm.
we want to make sure that that age doesn't stay the same because when you're thinking about those people have maybe already parents, potentially been grandparents by that time. So when we talk about cycles of abuse, when we talk about the mental health, epidemic that we're kind of seeing right now, that's where that stems from, right? And I think that all changes when we have supportive parenting, supportive adults in kids' life. So when you just open up those doors for communication, know where your kids are, what they're doing, who they're with, just being really present and involved, those chances in those situations we might see, change a little bit. And that's kind of the idea.
Okay. So the average age of disclosure is 52.
That's right.
So just so I understand, our audience understands, a child gets abused somehow. No one knows about it. They're not actually saying it out loud, essentially, until 52 years old. So
Right.
yeah, that's, I didn't know that. I knew it was later in life. I didn't realize it was in the 50s. I thought
Right.
maybe in the 30s, but okay. Is there a profile of an abuser? I know a
Well,
lot of times people think of like, a guy in a white van with puppy dogs and candy, luring
right.
kids from the park.
He's always got puppies, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what we were taught to, like stranger danger, right? And
Hmm.
so it's still a valid thing to talk about, and especially when we're talking about online situations. But typically when we're talking about people that perpetrate on children, it's people that have access to kids, right? So either it's going to be somebody in the family, somebody in the home. And it, unfortunately, we even see instances locally where it is a teacher, a coach, somebody who works with kids because they have access to kids, right? So you really need to watch out for those moments. Maybe kids that are being treated, singled out, more special by certain adults. Maybe you see people that are talking to kids, and you may not see all this too, because a lot of this is going to be behind closed doors. So it's a person who really tries to isolate a child, but they might start talking to the child more like an adult, giving gifts, trying to spend more time one-on-one with that child. And usually the people that we are talking about, and I'm sure you've heard the term grooming. We don't really use that term in court anymore. We use the term manipulation and manipulation process because that's just more accurate to what it is. Um, so usually these people also will be friends of the parents, friends of community, teacher of the year, coach of the year. They don't like wear the shirt that says I'm inappropriate with kids, right? It is
Hmm.
like the complete opposite person that you would think fits the profile a lot of the times. And then we've seen that way too much in our community lately too. So and that can be hard because a lot of these times these kids are, or these people are role models, right? Role models to our kids, people they look up to. So again, really making sure our kids understand that they have rights no matter who the person is, no matter if it's an adult, no matter if they're friends with the parents, right? That they still have rights and should be able to talk about absolutely anything and to say no loudly, that they can be loud about things also. So, and then that statistic also, I don't want to like not give hope and to scare people when I say 52 years old. There are things to look for. If kids aren't disclosing, changes in behavior is some of our biggest ones that we see. And it isn't always indicative of like an abusive situation. Maybe they have, maybe they're sick, maybe they have the flu or things like that. But just really picking up on changes in behavior is some of the biggest things that we see when kids aren't disclosing.
Some of this may be really new information for the audience, but I believe most of the time when there is that physical or sexual abuse, it's not just from a person that's known by the family, but also trusted by the family.
Mhm.
And that's it, that it's a little counterintuitive because it's easy to be suspicious of someone you don't know or trust. But I think following up with kids whenever they are with an adult or in a scenario like that, asking the questions, hey, did anything weird go on? Asking the touch question, did you get touched anywhere that was inappropriate, uncomfortable, and in the private areas, and being able to do that when you think it wouldn't happen because that's when it happens. I've never met parents of an abused kid and going, yeah, I didn't trust that adult, so I let my kids hang out with them. This
Right.
it seems like the story's always we trusted them, we knew them, they're we're friends with them, there's a relationship there, and then this happened.
Right.
And it's easy to think about that after the fact, but being proactive or practicing prevention, uh, man, just knowing that most of the time there's some sort of pre-existing relationship there or some
Hmm.
foundation of trust that should change a little bit about how we look at the whole situation, our kids' safety,
Hmm.
and dictate some of our behaviors moving forward there.
Right. Right. And if kids have some education about it too, I think just making sure those lines of communication are open, like you said, you can't walk around not trusting everybody all the time, because you're gonna have
Hmm.
kids, they're gonna have friends, they're gonna go over to play people's houses, and they should because that's part of growing up too, right? Part of socialization. So a lot of it is also gonna be, do your kids know what to do? Is there a way
Yeah.
they can call you? Maybe they don't have a cell phone yet, but maybe is there a way they can still reach out to you? If they're at a place, and if they're not old enough to do that, maybe you kind of, in your wisdom as a parent and like your expertise on your own child, maybe you kind of think about if they're going over to people's houses and things like that. And again, I don't want to make anybody afraid, but just make sure that you have a plan that your kid can get a hold of you if you need them to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I look at it. I spent 15 years working professionally with teenagers, and I had other adult staff, other adult volunteers, and we really had to place some standards on ourselves. We're never one-on-one with the kid behind closed doors or in a car, setting up some of those policies to protect ourselves and the children, and
Mhm.
that's is kind of taking the high road there. And some of those ideas aren't bad as a parent also to, like, I have a daughter and she has friends, but if they're hanging out and the friend needs a ride home, I'm not going to give the girl a ride by myself. I'm going to make sure my daughter's in the car with me.
Sure.
Some of those things, and then you can reverse engineer that and go, you know, is it necessary for the teacher or coach to be spending a lot of one-on-one time with the child? And if
Mhm.
they're resistant to the pushback, that might be a sign. But if they're open to the accountability or having that some of those standards or policies, like, no, we always have, you know, two people, another adult in the room. I think those are good indicators that there's appropriate measures being taken. But
Right.
yeah, it's walking that balance of, like, you can't be eternally paranoid, but you don't want to be blindly oblivious or naive either. And
Right. Right. And you know, as a parent, you're just I'm paranoid anyways, right? You're always worrying about your kid, and like that doesn't go away. Another thing to just kind of throw into that too is when you're talking about with coaching or, who's ever with your kids during the day, teaching, daycares, things like that, um, whatever they're doing should be interruptible, right? So if we start getting
mm,
messages that you can't be here as a parent, that's problematic, right? So
mm,
everything that has to do with your kids should be interruptible as well, too.
yeah, I like that. That's good.
Thanks.
Yeah, interruptible. Okay. This has been super good. What else, when you think of just kind of general education, what else comes to mind, or you think is, man, parents need to hear this?
Oh, there's probably a lot, right? There's so much. Gosh, when you're just talking about, you know, uh, age ranges and things your kids are exposed to these days, as well too. I think again, and I know that I probably said this too many times, but it's really just about communicating with your kids, right? And there's going to be times when you can't be there all the time, right? So it's just about communication. I think that's going to be your best preventative, parenting tool there is just communication. Lines of communication are open, and they may not tell you about absolutely everything. Even talk to them about, as a parent, who else can you talk to, right? So, my daughter doesn't have siblings, but she has some older cousins, right? So maybe talk to them about some things. So just making sure that their world is open to knowing who safe adults are that they can talk to. So just kind of have them think about that. Littles, when we go into the school, we usually challenge them to just name two safe adults, and we tell them somebody who's old enough to drive a car. We also talk about instincts. I like just tell the littles that it's their superhero power because kids love superheroes.
Mhm.
So I say it's that thing you get in your tummy, and it lets you know if you're in a safe situation or unsafe situations. We have to listen to it because our body's superpower is literally telling us if it's safe or not safe here. So we just making sure kids trust their instincts, like really trust their instincts, right? Like really understand that they have value, they have a voice, right? Older kids, I usually challenge them to name five safe people, just because it gets harder as they get older, right? And so, open up their doors to, parents that maybe they have a teacher that they feel comfortable with, or a counselor, or friends, parents, things like that. So just kind of open up their minds to who a safe person for them could be. We want them to make sure that if they tell this person right here and that person doesn't help them, that they have somebody else that they can go to, that they know that somebody that is an adult is going to be there for them. Because at the end of the day, everything that we say and do is about child safety, and child safety is an adult responsibility. So
Yeah.
if we teach them and give them all these tools, it's still our responsibility as an adult to keep them safe.
Yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned that communication. So talking to the dads, you don't want to punish behavior that you want repeated. And so if your child is open and vulnerable and honest with you, you don't want to punish that, even if they're being open, honest, and vulnerable with something that is against the rule. And I think having those two different spaces, because a lot of times kids will shut down because they think, man, if I tell my mom and dad, I'm going to get punished for this. And so Monica, you probably haven't watched the earlier podcast, but I do one on family dinner time, and I recommend after dinner playing games, like have game night after dinner and making a judgment-free zone so kids can talk. Because you're right, as soon as games start playing, the mouths start opening, and
Mhm.
they'll word vomit, and they'll start processing out loud and just talking and communicating, and it's such a rich environment. And sometimes you'll hear things that kids did at school that you don't really like. Save the judgment for later, and sometimes there needs to be a consequence. Like, you find out your kid's being a bully at school. We don't want that, right? So we need to correct our children, but save the correction for some other time and let them know that they can communicate and be open and honest without judgment. And that'll keep those doors of communication open. We don't want our kids to feel like they're being punished for being open and vulnerable and honest with us, when in fact maybe they're getting punished for being the bully, or whatever the situation is. But if we value that communication and transparency, we have to protect it. Got to protect it, and let them know it's okay, and they're not going to get in trouble for saying the thing that might be hard to say, or they might be embarrassed to say. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that communication piece is super important, and love that you're just reinforcing that open communication.
Yeah, I love the idea of judgment-free zone too. So whenever you have your time with your kids, you can literally let them know ahead of time, this is judgment-free zone, you know. So one thing that I tell my kid too is if it has to do with your safety in any way, that you are not in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, if
Yep.
there's anything with safety, you're not in trouble whatsoever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm going to steal that from you if you don't mind. I like judgment-free zone. That's I like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. Sometimes it's hard. Most of the time it's not. But sometimes I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Like, Aaron, just keep your mouth shut. Let the kid talk. Let them process. They're being open. And yeah, there's times where you just gotta bite your tongue a little bit, or just make a little mental note. We'll address that behavior later. But
Right.
now just keep talking, it's good. And yeah, and grace comes into play too. Like, okay, maybe I'll let you off the hook of that because you're being honest. And but yeah, that's so far it's served me well. And I think it's a good practice. So
Right. One day at a time, right? It's just one step,
yeah,
one day at a time.
yeah, that's it. Well, man, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah,
Uh, you had mentioned the some of the what do you FBI? You guys work with FBI?
we do. Yeah, we
Okay.
often co-present with our FBI partners and that are FBI Cybercrimes Task Force and FBI proper as well too. So just make sure we got the most current local information as well too.
Yeah, and I knew you're with local law enforcement with the county, and I think that's a great representation of the quality work that you do at Sunflower House, because it's not like that everywhere. A lot of agencies are doing some of their information gathering and processing internally, and then they have an external thing. But the fact that the county and nation trusts you is a huge testament to the work you're doing. So thank you.
Absolutely. So, and if
Yeah.
anybody wants to connect or learn more, they're welcome to look at us at sunflowerhouse.org. They can even shoot me an email if they want to, if they have any specific questions about anything. We're happy to help.
Okay. Well, I'll drop your email in the show notes.
Okay. All right. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Monica.
All right.
Bye.